Alex had been waiting for this moment for years. After long hours of work, saving, and searching, he finally found a house that felt like it was meant for him. It was not just any house. It sat right on the edge of a quiet, sparkling lake, surrounded by tall pines and open skies. From the moment he stepped onto the property, he felt a mix of relief and excitement. This was the life he had imagined. A peaceful retreat where he could finally relax and enjoy simple joys like fishing, reading by the lake, and hosting friends for small gatherings on sunny afternoons. The house itself was modest but charming. A large porch wrapped around the front, perfect for watching the sunrise over the water. Inside, the rooms were cozy and filled with natural light, with a fireplace that promised warmth during cold nights. There were small imperfections here and there, but Alex saw them as opportunities to put his personal touch on the home. He had always believed that a house became truly special when someone cared for it, and he was ready to start that journey. Moving in was a mix of excitement and exhaustion. Carrying boxes up the stairs, arranging furniture, and setting up the kitchen felt like a workout. But every time Alex stepped onto the porch and looked at the lake, he felt a surge of happiness that made all the effort worthwhile. The first evening, he sat in an old chair he had brought with him, sipping coffee as the sun set behind the trees. The water reflected a golden glow, and the soft sound of leaves rustling in the wind made him feel that he had finally found a place where he belonged. The next morning, Alex decided to take a walk around the property. The grass was still damp from the early frost, and he could see his breath in the crisp air. As he strolled along the edge of the lake, he noticed docks jutting out into the water. Some were small and simple, while others were large enough for a few boats. It seemed like the neighbors had been using them for years. Alex had assumed that the lakefront was communal, but he decided to ask a neighbor just to be sure. A man in his 50s with a kind but cautious demeanor was raking leaves near one of the docks. Alex approached and introduced himself. The man smiled politely and returned the greeting. Alex mentioned that he had just moved in and asked about the lake access and the docks. The man hesitated for a moment, then explained that the neighborhood had a homeowners association, and they managed the docks and common areas. Alex nodded, trying to appear friendly, but he noticed a flicker of something in the man's eyes, almost a warning. He thanked him and continued his walk, making a mental note to learn more about the HOA later. Over the next few days, Alex focused on unpacking and arranging his new home. The neighborhood was quiet, and he enjoyed the peace that came with it. However, he could sense that the HOA was always nearby, monitoring, though not always directly. Flyers arrived in his mailbox outlining rules and regulations he had never heard of before, and letters were left at his door reminding him of guidelines about everything from lawn care to landscaping choices. Alex felt a little overwhelmed but reminded himself that this was normal in many communities, and he could navigate it. One afternoon, as he was unpacking books into the small study, he heard a knock at the door. Standing outside was the HOA president, Mr. Keller. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed, with a sharp gaze that made Alex feel like he was under a microscope. Mr. Keller introduced himself in a polite but firm manner and explained that he wanted to welcome Alex to the community. Alex returned the greeting, hoping the meeting would be brief and cordial. However, the conversation quickly turned serious. Mr. Keller mentioned that the HOA had rules regarding lake access, dock use, and property boundaries. He implied that Alex might not have rights over the waterfront, and that newcomers often needed guidance to understand how things worked in the neighborhood. Alex listened carefully, nodding, but he felt a knot of unease forming in his stomach. Something about Mr. Keller's tone suggested that the HOA was more controlling than he had expected. Over the next few days, Alex tried to familiarize himself with the community and its rules. He attended a neighborhood meeting, hoping to get a better sense of how the HOA operated. The meeting was polite on the surface, but Alex quickly realized that the HOA had significant influence over everyone's actions. Members seemed to agree with each other without question, and newcomers were subtly pressured to follow traditions they hadn't even known existed. Alex felt a mix of frustration and curiosity. He didn't like the idea of being told how to live in his own home, but he also understood the importance of diplomacy. For now, he decided to observe and learn. Despite the tension with the HOA, Alex found joy in the simple pleasures of his property. He spent mornings fishing by the lake, evenings reading on the porch and weekends planting flowers and small trees. The sound of water lapping against the docks and the occasional call of a loon made him feel at home in a way that no city apartment ever had. He began to imagine hosting small gatherings where friends could enjoy the lake and share in his love for the place. But even as he relaxed, he could sense that the HOA's presence was never far away. One morning, a truck with a plow unexpectedly arrived at his driveway. Alex was stunned. He ran outside to find the plow had pushed snow and ice onto his property, leaving a messy pile near his front door. Before he could speak to the driver, Mr. Keller appeared, along with 2 other HOA members. They spoke in a tone that suggested authority, explaining that the plow was part of the HOA's winter maintenance program and that Alex should have followed certain protocols. Alex was taken aback. He hadn't signed any agreements regarding plowing, nor had he been informed that the HOA had the right to enter his property in this way. The encounter left Alex feeling both frustrated and uneasy. He wanted to respond calmly but firmly. He took a few deep breaths, listening to their claims while thinking about his next steps. After the group left, he inspected the damage. The driveway was a mess, but nothing was irreparably harmed. Still, the incident made him realize that he needed to understand his property rights more thoroughly and to approach the HOA with knowledge rather than emotion. Determined not to be intimidated, Alex spent the next few days researching property laws, reviewing his deeds and speaking with local experts. He discovered that his property deed included certain rights over the waterfront and docks that the HOA had assumed they controlled. This was a significant revelation. He realized that the plowing incident was not just an overreach, but also a symptom of the HOA's misunderstanding of his ownership. For the first time, Alex felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. He now had the knowledge to assert his rights if necessary. While researching, Alex also began to build subtle connections with neighbors who seemed more approachable. Some shared quiet stories of past conflicts with the HOA, revealing a pattern of overreach that had gone largely unchallenged. Alex listened carefully, taking mental notes without revealing too much about his own situation. These conversations gave him a sense of the community dynamics and helped him plan how to handle future interactions with the HOA without creating unnecessary conflict. As the days passed, Alex became more comfortable in his home. He started small projects around the property, planting flowers near the porch, clearing brush along the lake, and fixing minor repairs in the house. Each task made him feel more rooted and confident. He also began to think strategically about how to approach the HOA. Instead of reacting with anger, he would wait, observe, and gather facts. Knowledge, he realized, would be his greatest ally. One evening, as Alex sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, he reflected on his first few weeks in the neighborhood. Moving in had been both exhilarating and challenging. The house was everything he had dreamed of, but the presence of the HOA added an unexpected layer of complexity. He understood that he needed to navigate this carefully. Yet as the water shimmered in the fading light and a gentle breeze rustled the trees, Alex felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had found a place he could call home, and he was ready to face the challenges that came with it. For the first time, Alex allowed himself to imagine life fully settled here. He pictured summers spent fishing with friends, evenings around a fire pit by the lake, and quiet mornings with coffee on the porch. He imagined knowing the community well, respected for his knowledge of his property and his fair approach to sharing resources. These thoughts gave him both comfort and motivation. He knew that the next steps would require patience, research, and careful planning. But he also knew that he had the tools to handle whatever challenges the HOA might present. As night fell, Alex closed the door, leaving the porch light on to cast a warm glow over the driveway. He felt ready to tackle the next chapter, aware that living by the lake was not just about peace and beauty, but also about standing up for his rights and understanding the community he had joined. With that thought, he turned off the lights, knowing that tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new challenges, and new opportunities to make his dream home truly his own. The next morning, Alex woke to a chill in the air. Winter had arrived fully, and frost covered the grass, sparkling like tiny diamonds under the pale sunlight. He grabbed his coffee and stepped onto the porch, hoping for a quiet start. The lake was still, reflecting the soft glow of dawn, but a sense of unease lingered in his mind. Yesterday's run-in with the HOA had left him unsettled, and he knew it was only the beginning of what he would face. As he sipped his coffee, Alex noticed tracks in the snow leading from the road to his driveway. His heart sank as he realized the HOA had been at his property again. A few minutes later, a truck appeared and a man began shoveling and plowing snow onto his driveway. Alex hurried down the porch steps and called out, but the man barely looked up. He was following instructions, he said, and the HOA had told him to clear the drive. Alex's frustration grew. He had not agreed to any such service, nor had he asked for it. Before he could say more, Mr. Keller appeared, flanked by two other HOA members. Their expressions were stern, and their presence made Alex feel small and cornered. Mr. Keller spoke in a voice that was polite but firm. He explained that the HOA had responsibilities to manage winter maintenance in the neighborhood, and that Alex should have been aware of this policy. Alex listened carefully, trying to stay calm, but he could feel the tension rising. This was more than just a misunderstanding. The HOA was trying to assert control over his property, and he could not allow it to happen again. After the men left, Alex examined the mess. Snow and ice had been pushed onto the sides of the driveway, and some of the edging around the yard was damaged. He took deep breaths, reminding himself that he needed to handle the situation wisely. Reacting with anger could make things worse. Instead, he decided to document everything. He took photos of the damage, the plow marks, and the areas where the snow had been dumped. He knew that if things escalated, having a record would be essential. The following day, Alex spent hours researching property laws, homeowner rights, and HOA regulations. He pored over his deeds, maps of the lakefront, and historical records. It was a lot to digest, but slowly he began to understand the true extent of his property rights. To his surprise, the deed clearly indicated that he controlled certain sections of the lake and the docks. The very resources the HOA had implied were theirs to manage. A mix of relief and determination washed over him. He now had the knowledge he needed to defend his property, but he also understood that strategy and patience were crucial. Alex decided that knowledge alone was not enough. He needed allies. Over the next week, he discreetly spoke with neighbors who seemed more approachable. Some shared stories of their own struggles with the HOA, recounting times when they had been pressured into following rules that seemed unnecessary or unfair. Others mentioned small instances where the HOA overstepped, asserting authority without legal backing. Alex listened carefully, absorbing the information while maintaining a neutral stance. He did not want to appear confrontational yet, but he wanted to understand the full picture. One evening, a neighbor named Laura invited Alex over for tea. She lived a few houses down and had been in the neighborhood for over 20 years. During their conversation, she spoke about the HOA with a mix of frustration and humor. She told stories about meetings where members of the HOA tried to enforce rules that were outdated or irrelevant, and how residents had learned to quietly resist or find loopholes. Alex realized he was not alone. Many had been quietly enduring the HOA's overreach, and this gave him confidence that he could navigate the situation carefully and successfully. While building these relationships, Alex also began observing the HOA more closely. He attended community events, listening to discussions and noting how members interacted. It became clear that Mr. Keller and a few others held significant influence, often swaying decisions with subtle pressure. Some neighbors nodded along even when they disagreed, showing that fear of confrontation was common. Alex realized that the key was to gather undeniable evidence and present it logically, leaving little room for argument. The HOA could be intimidating, but facts were harder to dispute than opinion. As the days grew colder, Alex focused on practical improvements to his property. He cleared brush along the lake, reinforced the dock, and repaired the porch railing. These tasks gave him a sense of control and accomplishment. Each evening, he would sit on the porch, watching the lake shimmer in the fading light, reflecting on the steps he needed to take. He reminded himself that patience was essential. Rushing into a confrontation could backfire, but careful planning could turn the situation in his favor. One weekend, Alex received another letter from the HOA. This time, it was a formal notice regarding lake access and dock usage. The language was strict. implying that he had no rights over the docks and that his use of the waterfront was subject to HOA approval. Alex felt a surge of determination. He had anticipated resistance, and this was exactly why he had been documenting everything and researching the deeds. Now he had the ammunition he needed to respond effectively. Alex began drafting a plan. He would formally request a meeting with the HOA, presenting his evidence and calmly asserting his legal rights. He wrote down points, referenced deeds, and included historical records showing his control over specific docks. He practiced speaking clearly and confidently, knowing that tone would be as important as facts. He also planned to involve a lawyer if necessary, but he hoped that a calm, factual approach would be sufficient to resolve the conflict without escalation. As he prepared, Alex continued to engage with the community. Some neighbors offered subtle support, sharing advice on how to approach HOA meetings and suggesting ways to avoid unnecessary tension. These conversations were invaluable, giving him insight into the unwritten rules and expectations of the neighborhood. He realized that part of winning this battle was not just asserting his rights but also fostering goodwill. People respected fairness and transparency, and Alex planned to use that to his advantage. When the day of the HOA meeting arrived, Alex felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. He dressed neatly, bringing all his documentation and notes. The meeting was held in the community hall, and a number of residents were present. Mr. Keller greeted him with a polite smile, but Alex could sense the underlying tension. The room was quiet as he set up his papers and prepared to speak. Alex began calmly, introducing himself and thanking everyone for the opportunity to address the group. He outlined his understanding of the property, referencing the deeds and historical records that confirmed his rights over the docks. He spoke clearly and confidently, making sure to remain respectful but firm. As he presented the evidence, he noticed murmurs among the audience. Some neighbors looked surprised while others exchanged glances with curiosity. Even Mr. Keller's expression changed slightly, hinting that Alex had caught him off guard. Questions arose, and Alex answered each one carefully. He avoided confrontation, focusing on facts and clarity. Gradually, the room's tension shifted. The HOA members could not dispute the documentation, and Alex's calm demeanor gained him respect. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that the power dynamics were beginning to change. Alex had asserted his rights without alienating the community, and the message was unmistakable. He was not to be intimidated. After the meeting, a few neighbors approached him quietly, expressing support and admiration for how he handled the situation. Alex felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. He had faced a significant challenge and navigated it successfully, using patience, research, and diplomacy. It was the first major step in establishing his place in the neighborhood and securing his property rights. That evening, Alex sat on the porch looking at the lake under a sky filled with stars. The cold winter air felt refreshing, and he reflected on the past weeks. Moving into a new home had brought unexpected challenges, but he had met them with determination and clarity. He realized that this experience had taught him valuable lessons about resilience, strategy, and the importance of understanding one's rights. The lake, once a symbol of serenity, now also represented empowerment. Alex felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, confident that he could protect his home and create the peaceful life he had envisioned. After the tense HOA meeting, Alex felt a mixture of relief and determination. The first step had been taken and he had presented the facts clearly, but he knew this was only the beginning. The neighborhood was small, and relationships mattered. If he wanted long-term peace, he had to navigate not just the HOA, but also the community dynamics carefully. He decided to continue learning, observing, and strengthening his position while remaining friendly and approachable. Over the next few days, Alex spent time exploring every detail of his property and the surrounding lake. He walked the shoreline, noting boundaries, measuring distances, and taking photographs of docks, trees, and markers that defined his land. He cross-referenced everything with his deeds, maps, and historical documents. Slowly, a picture emerged. Alex not only owned the lakefront property, but he also had legal control over certain docks that the HOA had assumed belonged to the community. This was more than a discovery. It was empowerment. He realized that he now had the ability to assert his rights without conflict, as long as he acted strategically. While gathering information, Alex also reached out to a local attorney who specialized in property and HOA disputes. The lawyer explained the legal nuances, confirming Alex's understanding of his rights. He advised patience and suggested formal documentation of everything. He emphasized that the HOA might initially resist, but with clear evidence, Alex could legally protect his property. Armed with this knowledge, Alex felt more confident. He began drafting letters and preparing records, making sure every step was well documented. Knowledge had become his shield and his weapon. Even as he focused on legal matters, Alex continued building relationships in the neighborhood. He spent time talking to neighbors who had experienced minor conflicts with the HOA in the past. Many shared quiet frustrations about rules they felt were unfair or inconsistently applied. These conversations gave Alex insight into the HOA's patterns, revealing that intimidation and subtle pressure were common tactics. He listened more than he spoke, knowing that patience and observation were key to understanding the full dynamics of the community. One afternoon, while examining the docks, Alex noticed subtle signs that some were not being maintained properly. Wooden boards were loose and a few had begun to rot. The HOA had allowed these conditions to persist, perhaps underestimating their importance to residents. Alex made notes and took pictures. He realized that by taking care of the docks properly, he could demonstrate leadership and responsibility, which would further strengthen his position. At the same time, he began planning small improvements, knowing that action often spoke louder than words. As the days passed, Alex also focused on his home and personal projects. He built small walkways along the lake, planted flowers, and cleared brush, creating a welcoming and well-maintained environment. Each improvement gave him a sense of ownership and control, reinforcing his connection to the property. These tasks also provided a sense of calm, balancing the stress of legal research and community politics. He found solace in simple, productive work, reminding himself that progress often came from small, consistent steps. During this period, Alex began noticing subtle shifts in the community. Some neighbors started approaching him for advice on property matters or seeking guidance on dock maintenance. He responded with helpful suggestions, emphasizing fairness and transparency. His reputation grew quietly, and he realized that by acting as a resource rather than a rival, he could foster goodwill and reduce potential conflicts. This approach was deliberate, allowing him to assert influence without direct confrontation. One afternoon, a neighbor approached him with a question about property boundaries. Alex pulled out his notes and maps, explaining clearly and patiently. The neighbor nodded appreciatively, thanking him for his guidance. Alex felt a sense of accomplishment. By sharing knowledge and demonstrating fairness, he was building trust and credibility. He understood that community respect would be crucial if the HOA attempted further overreach. Meanwhile, Alex continued monitoring the HOA's actions. He noticed meetings where certain members tried to push rules without full legal backing. Others followed along silently, hesitant to challenge authority. Alex observed quietly, learning the social dynamics and power structures. He realized that winning this challenge required more than legal documentation. It required careful strategy and an understanding of human behavior. Timing, tone, and approach mattered as much as facts. One week, Alex received an invitation to a casual neighborhood gathering. He accepted, viewing it as an opportunity to engage with residents in a friendly setting. During the gathering, he spoke with several neighbors individually, listening to their experiences and sharing insights about property rights without being confrontational. His calm and approachable demeanor made a strong impression. People began to see him as knowledgeable, fair, and trustworthy, which would be invaluable in upcoming interactions with the HOA. In parallel, Alex continued documenting everything meticulously. He photographed docks, property lines, and any maintenance issues, creating a comprehensive record. He also drafted letters to the HOA, outlining his rights and responsibilities, while keeping the tone respectful and factual. This preparation gave him confidence. He knew that when the time came to assert his legal rights formally, he would be ready. As the winter progressed, Alex began small projects on the docks he legally controlled. He repaired loose boards, treated wood to prevent rot, and ensured safe access for neighbors who respected the property lines. These actions demonstrated his commitment to the community and his responsibility as a property owner. Over time, more neighbors began noticing his efforts, quietly acknowledging his leadership without any overt confrontation. Alex realized that action and reliability often carried more weight than arguments. Despite the progress, Alex remained vigilant. He knew the HOA could challenge his claims, perhaps subtly or indirectly. He continued attending meetings, observing behavior and maintaining detailed records of interactions. Each encounter provided insight into personalities, tactics, and potential weaknesses. Alex understood that knowledge, patience, and careful observation were crucial to turning the situation in his favor. One afternoon, while reviewing his notes and photos, Alex realized that he had built a strong foundation. He understood his legal rights, had community support, and had demonstrated responsibility and fairness. He also recognized that the HOA's previous overreach had been based on assumptions and intimidation, rather than fact. With careful planning, he could assert his authority without creating unnecessary conflict. As the days went by, Alex began to imagine the next steps. He planned to request a formal meeting with the HOA, presenting his evidence calmly and clearly. He would assert his legal rights over the docks while emphasizing fairness and cooperation. His goal was not confrontation but clarity, ensuring that both he and the community understood the boundaries and responsibilities. By taking a strategic approach, he could resolve the situation while maintaining positive relationships. In the evenings, Alex continued to enjoy his home and the lake. He spent time walking along the shoreline, observing wildlife, and reflecting on his progress. Each day, he felt more connected to the property and more confident in his ability to handle challenges. The lake, once simply a place of beauty and tranquility, had become a symbol of his persistence, knowledge, and empowerment. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, Alex felt prepared for the upcoming confrontation. He had patience, knowledge, and community support on his side. He understood the importance of timing, approach, and tone. By acting strategically, he could assert his rights without unnecessary conflict, turning a potentially stressful situation into an opportunity for clarity and fairness. Alex knew the path ahead would not be easy, but he was ready. The months of observation, research, and careful interaction with neighbors had equipped him with the tools he needed. The lake, the docks, and his home were more than property. They were a testament to his resilience and foresight. With confidence and patience, he looked forward to the next chapter, ready to assert his rightful control while fostering respect and harmony within the community. By the time Alex felt ready for the formal meeting with the HOA, weeks of preparation had given him confidence. He had documented every detail, gathered legal backing, and built quiet support from neighbors who respected his fairness and diligence. He knew the meeting would be tense, but he also knew that preparation and calmness would give him an advantage. The day of the meeting arrived. Alex dressed neatly, carrying his folders of evidence, maps, photographs, and historical documents that clearly demonstrated his rights over the docks. As he entered the community hall, he noticed several familiar faces among the neighbors. Some nodded politely, a few whispered quietly, and others looked curious. Mr. Keller, the HOA president, was already present, standing near a table with his own set of papers. His demeanor was calm but alert, a sign that he knew this discussion might not go the way he expected. The meeting began formally. Mr. Keller welcomed everyone and outlined the purpose of the gathering. Alex listened carefully, noting the subtle ways in which authority and influence were being asserted. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up confidently, introducing himself and thanking the board and residents for allowing him to present his case. His voice was calm, clear, and steady, setting a tone of respect and professionalism. Alex began by explaining his understanding of the property, referencing the deeds and legal documents that confirmed his rights over the docks. He presented photographs showing the docks he maintained, the boundaries of his property, and the historical maps that supported his claim. He spoke slowly, making sure each point was understood and avoided confrontational language. The goal was clarity, not conflict. As he spoke, Alex noticed subtle reactions in the room. Some neighbors appeared surprised, others whispered to each other, and a few nodded in acknowledgement. Mr. Keller's expression shifted slightly, a mix of surprise and concern. It was clear that Alex's evidence had disrupted the assumptions that the HOA had held for years. They had believed control over the docks was unquestioned, and now the facts challenged their authority. Questions arose from both the board and the audience. Mr. Keller asked about specific boundaries, maintenance responsibilities, and the legal basis for Alex's claims. Alex answered each question patiently and thoroughly, referring directly to the evidence he had collected. He emphasized his desire for fairness and cooperation, stressing that he was not seeking conflict, but clarity and proper recognition of his rights. His calm approach began to win respect from several neighbors who could see the validity of his points. Throughout the discussion, Alex maintained a composed demeanor. Even when a board member attempted to argue a point based on tradition rather than law, he responded with facts, avoiding personal attacks. This approach frustrated some of the HOA members who relied on intimidation and assumptions rather than documented proof. By remaining factual and respectful, Alex demonstrated authority without aggression. After a lengthy discussion, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Neighbors who had initially been quiet started to voice support, noting that Alex's evidence and approach made sense. They acknowledged that his care for the docks and property had been visible and consistent, and that he had acted responsibly. The murmurs of agreement grew, subtly reinforcing his position. Mr. Keller realized that continuing to challenge Alex directly could damage the HOA's credibility. He adjusted his tone, asking clarifying questions rather than attempting to assert control. The balance of power had shifted. Alex's preparation and calmness had made it difficult for the HOA to dominate the discussion. He had turned what could have been a tense confrontation into an opportunity to establish clear boundaries and mutual understanding. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Alex's position was recognized. The HOA members could no longer claim unchallenged authority over the docks, and the evidence presented by Alex had forced them to acknowledge his legal rights. The room had transitioned from tension and skepticism to cautious acceptance and respect. Neighbors who had been hesitant to speak up now nodded or quietly congratulated Alex on his careful and fair approach. After the meeting, several neighbors approached Alex individually, expressing admiration for how he had handled the situation. They appreciated his calm demeanor, factual presentation, and willingness to engage respectfully. Alex felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. He had navigated a potentially hostile environment, asserted his rights, and gained respect without unnecessary conflict. Over the following days, Alex focused on maintaining relationships within the community. He continued minor improvements on the docks and waterfront, demonstrating that he was responsible and fair-minded. He also kept communication open with the HOA, responding promptly to questions and requests in a professional manner. By combining firmness with approachability, he reinforced his authority while maintaining goodwill. As the weeks passed, Alex noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood dynamics. Some of the more assertive HOA members became less domineering, realizing that intimidation would not work with him. Others began to treat him with greater respect, acknowledging his knowledge and fairness. Even neighbors who had been skeptical started seeking his advice on property matters, further solidifying his influence within the community. Alex also used the experience to educate himself further. He learned more about local property laws, community regulations, and strategies for navigating complex social dynamics. This knowledge allowed him to anticipate potential conflicts and address them proactively. He realized that being well-informed and strategic was as important as having legal rights. It allowed him to act confidently and effectively in any situation. Despite the challenges, Alex continued to enjoy the simple pleasures of his property. He spent mornings walking along the lake, afternoons working on small projects, and evenings relaxing on the porch, reflecting on the day. The lake had become more than just a place of beauty. It symbolized his perseverance, preparation, and ability to assert his rights responsibly. Each moment of peace was earned through careful planning and measured action. In time, the community began to see Alex not as a newcomer or a threat, but as a knowledgeable, fair, and responsible member. His handling of the HOA challenge had demonstrated both competence and integrity. The docks were maintained, the property boundaries respected, and tensions eased. Alex realized that patience, preparation, and respectful communication had been key to achieving this outcome. By the end of this chapter in his life, Alex had not only secured his legal rights but also gained a level of trust and respect that would serve him well in the future. The experience had taught him the importance of careful observation, thorough preparation, and measured action. He understood that community dynamics could be complex and that power often relied on perception as much as authority. By approaching the situation with intelligence, patience, and fairness, he had turned a potentially adversarial scenario into an opportunity for positive resolution. As Alex stood on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the lake, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The water reflected the colors of the sky, calm and serene, mirroring the balance he had achieved within the community. The challenges with the HOA were now behind him, replaced by a sense of clarity and respect. Alex knew that maintaining this harmony would require ongoing care and attention, but he also knew that he had the tools, knowledge, and character to handle any situation. The lake, the docks, and his home were now firmly his, not just in law but in the trust and recognition of the community around him. After the tense showdown with the HOA, life slowly began to settle into a rhythm for Alex. The docks were clearly recognized as part of his property, and the HOA had stepped back, no longer attempting to assert control over areas he legally managed. The shift in dynamics brought a sense of relief, but Alex understood that maintaining this new balance required ongoing care, communication, and fairness. He started by reaching out to neighbors who had quietly supported him or expressed curiosity during the HOA meetings. Alex organized informal gatherings at his home and along the lake, inviting residents to enjoy the waterfront and discuss shared interests. These events were simple: coffee in the morning, a small barbecue in the evening, but they allowed people to connect without the tension of formal HOA meetings. Over time, neighbors began to see Alex not just as someone asserting his property rights, but as someone genuinely invested in the well-being of the community. As spring approached, Alex focused on improving the property further. He repaired older docks, replaced worn boards, and ensured safe access for anyone who respected boundaries. He also planted new trees along the shoreline and added small benches to encourage people to enjoy the natural surroundings. These improvements were subtle but meaningful, demonstrating care and responsibility. Neighbors began to take notice and occasionally stopped by to offer thanks or ask questions. Showing a growing respect for his efforts, Alex continued to keep lines of communication open with the HOA. He responded to letters and inquiries promptly, maintaining a tone of professionalism and courtesy. When minor issues arose, he addressed them calmly and clearly, often resolving potential disputes before they escalated. By combining firmness with diplomacy, Alex maintained control of his property while fostering a sense of cooperation. This approach gradually reshaped the way neighbors and HOA members perceived him. The experience had also taught Alex valuable lessons about human behavior and community dynamics. He understood that power often relied on perception, and that intimidation or aggression could be countered by knowledge, preparation, and calm assertiveness. He became more aware of how people respond to fairness and transparency, and he used this understanding to navigate interactions thoughtfully. Over time, he developed a reputation as someone reliable, fair, and respectful, a role that gave him influence without confrontation. One summer evening, Alex noticed children from the neighborhood playing along the shoreline near the docks he maintained. Their laughter and excitement brought a smile to his face. He realized that his efforts had created a space that could be enjoyed safely and responsibly by everyone. He walked over to check the area, ensuring that safety measures were in place, and gently reminded the children to be careful around the water. The parents nearby and observing expressed gratitude, and Alex felt a sense of fulfillment. The lake was no longer just a view from his porch. It was a shared space, maintained with care and respect. Over the months, Alex continued to balance improvements on his property with careful attention to community relations. He organized small cleanup days along the shoreline, inviting neighbors to join in. These efforts encouraged collaboration and fostered a sense of ownership among residents. Even those who had initially been skeptical of his intentions began to participate, recognizing his dedication to fairness and community well-being. Alex understood that leadership often comes quietly, through consistent action rather than overt assertion. The HOA, having experienced Alex's careful and factual approach, became less aggressive in their oversight. Meetings were calmer, and discussions about property boundaries and dock usage became more focused on shared understanding rather than conflict. Some HOA members, previously assertive and domineering, began to acknowledge Alex's knowledge and fairness openly. They realized that cooperation and respect yielded better results than intimidation. Alex also continued his personal projects, adding small touches to the home and lakefront. He built a small fire pit for gatherings, added lighting along pathways, and repaired minor wear and tear around the property. Each improvement reinforced his role as a responsible and engaged homeowner. Neighbors often stopped to compliment his work or seek advice, further integrating him into the community fabric. Through consistent effort, Alex had turned what began as a tense and uncertain situation into an opportunity to lead by example. As fall approached, the changing colors of the trees reflected the progress Alex had made over the year. The lake sparkled in the morning light, docks were well maintained, and the neighborhood had begun to view him as a respected member rather than a newcomer to be challenged. Alex reflected on the journey, the initial tension, the careful preparation, the strategic meetings, and the gradual shift in relationships. He realized that patience, knowledge, and calm assertiveness had been key to achieving this outcome. One evening, while sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, Alex watched the sun set over the lake. The water mirrored the golden sky, calm and serene, a reflection of the balance he had created in his life and community. He thought about the challenges he had faced and felt a sense of pride in how he had navigated them. The lake, once simply a beautiful view, had become a symbol of his perseverance, careful planning, and commitment to fairness. Over time, Alex noticed a change in the atmosphere of the neighborhood. Meetings with the HOA were more cooperative, and discussions about lake use and property boundaries were handled with mutual respect. Neighbors were more willing to communicate openly, and minor disputes were resolved calmly. Alex understood that he had helped shift the community toward a more transparent and fair approach. His actions had not only secured his property rights, but also improved the overall environment for everyone. Alex's story became known quietly among the residents. They spoke of his calm and respectful approach, his diligence in maintaining the property, and his fairness in dealing with disputes. Even those who had initially opposed him acknowledged that his methods were effective and admirable. The respect he earned was not based on dominance or force, but on knowledge, preparation, and consistent, thoughtful action. Alex felt satisfied knowing that he had achieved his goals without compromising his values. In the end, Alex enjoyed his home fully. He spent mornings walking along the lake, afternoons tending to the property, and evenings watching the sunset from the porch. The docks he had fought for were well maintained, used responsibly by neighbors, and a testament to his patience and perseverance. The community had shifted from tension to collaboration, and Alex had found a place where he could live peacefully while protecting what was rightfully his. The journey had been challenging, but it had also been rewarding. Alex learned the importance of understanding legal rights, observing community dynamics, and approaching conflicts with calm and strategy. He realized that true respect is earned through consistent action, fairness, and integrity. The lake, the docks, and his home were now secure, not just legally but socially, reflecting a balance that he had worked hard to create. As the year drew to a close, Alex looked back on the experiences that had tested his patience and resilience. The initial challenges with the HOA had been daunting, but through careful preparation, research, and thoughtful engagement, he had transformed a tense situation into an opportunity for growth and leadership. He understood that living in a community required both firmness and diplomacy, and he had demonstrated that these qualities could coexist successfully. Sitting on the porch one last evening before winter returned, Alex felt a deep sense of contentment. The lake glimmered in the fading light, the docks stood solid and safe, and the neighborhood had come to respect his knowledge and fairness. Alex knew that maintaining this balance would require ongoing care, but he was confident in his ability to do so. The challenges he faced had taught him valuable lessons about resilience, strategy, and community, and he looked forward to the future with optimism and satisfaction. He had not only claimed his rights but had also created a harmonious environment that reflected his values and efforts, turning a once tense situation into a lasting success.